My name is Barbara Imhof. I'm from Vienna, Austria. I'm the co-founder and co-managing director of LIQUIFER Systems Group, LSG. And I really appreciate very much that Philip and his team put LSG onto the LASG map, the Living Architecture Systems Group. We call ourselves Systems Group because we comprise of an interdisciplinary team with space engineers, scientists, architects, and designers. And we are a company, but we very much work like a research group, a very small research group. And because we have all these different expertise, we work a lot for the European Space Agency, the human spaceflight projects, but also as part of the European Framework Program and funded by other European institutions. What we have to do is we often have to familiarize ourselves. So we go into the labs of the scientists. So this was part, the big picture here was part of a simulation, lunar underwater simulation mission. So there's all different kinds of environments, professional environments we have to immerse in to get to know a better understanding of the people with who we collaborate. What do we do? One of our main focus is human space exploration. Not only, we also work with biomimetics, with Petra Gruber, and with biological systems. More recently, Simone mentioned that with the Living Architecture project, which is led by Rachel Armstrong. But for space exploration, when you look at a base, then let's say a lunar base, could also be a Martian base. You have different kinds of elements. You have stationary elements. That could be, for example, a greenhouse. So this is a project, the Eden ISS greenhouse, which we worked with the German Aerospace Center. Under the lead of the German Aerospace Center was a big team, and we installed aeroponic systems in Antarctica, and it was quite successful. So we got an extension for another 2 years, and Antarctica is a good simulation analog. So what that means is that actually it's a good place to simulate space on Earth. Another part of simulation hardware we produced was a deployable habitat, a project which was also then taken to a Mars simulation. It is transportable and it can be deployed, double its size. It's for 2 people for a 2-week mission. And in a base, we also have mobile elements. This was a study for the European Space Agency, a pressurized rover, a mobile research laboratory. Or we also worked on robotic systems for trafficability for Mars rovers, or on EVA, extravehicular activity systems, tools for exploring unknown terrain. So in the last 15 years, we have been working a lot on all these different kinds of projects, trying to create different perspectives on a base, and also different hardware, or creating different expertise. We are also known for simulator studies, so it's artificial simulators, buildings, and within these buildings you simulate space missions as preparation for real missions. And more recently we also have gone into looking at resources, what resources we actually have available, and how we can use them to create bases, to create envelopes. And in that part, we also looked at 3D printing, and then, of course, what sustains life in these very extreme environments are their life support systems. So we also have somehow touched a little bit on these aspects. For these coming 10 minutes, I'd really like to talk a little bit more about resources. So I'd like to show 2 projects. And then in the Q&A, I can also, if you like, I can also talk a little bit about responsive spaces for space exploration. But I think for living and for architecture and for living architecture, the topic of resource is quite an important one. So this is an image which was created for a lunar base as part of a project which was called Regolite. So it takes solar sintering, which was invented in 1994 by a team around American scientist Dr. David Allen, and then later on by a NASA scientist, 2010, named Hintze. And this is what you see here is there are different elements and they're interlocking building parts which have a very specific geometry. They can put on top of each other and form these shieldings, these envelopes, 3-meter thick shields. Why do we need that? On the moon we have a very specific atmosphere, or actually a lack of atmosphere. There's vacuum, there is hard, really strong radiation from the sun, but also cosmic background radiation from which we have to protect ourselves. And so when we look at the available resources, what do we have? We have a little bit of water, which could help us shield ourselves from radiation, but what we also have, we have an abundance of sand and sun, and the sun, because there's no atmosphere. So the process of solar sintering, this is what we took further under the lead of the German Aerospace Center. It was also a multi-partner project. Solar sintering really concentrates a solar beam and through an additive layer, 3D printing technology, can glue, I would say, or sinter layer by layer on top of each other, creating building elements. You don't need any kind of additional binder, so you don't have to bring any additional material. You can just do it with the materials available. So you can create different kinds of elements. For shelters, also you have to shield all the robotic systems, the rovers, and everything from these very harsh radiation, but also protect them from the dust. We made 3 tests to advance the technology. This is the first test with an automated XYZ table. So what you see here is there's a 3D model it's put in the computer, and then the data gets onto that into that machine. Basically, you also see on top of the machine a feeder, so where there's layer by layer is put onto that plate, onto that table, and the geometry is created through that beam, which is coming from a simulated sun, which you would find on the moon. It's by xenon lights, done by xenon lights. So it's a simulation basically, and you can create objects like these. And we used a simulation sand. It's called JC2A. So there are different kinds of lunar simulation sands, and they have similar characteristics as you can find on the moon. This was for the mares, for the lowlands on the moon, a simulation sand. You can also see that there's the technology is of course in development. There's still, you see, what you shouldn't see are these different layers. So this needs to be enhanced. But what you can get is quite an integrated piece of brick. Let's put it that way. Another test was, because this was a smaller building volume, so we wanted to enlarge our building volume, because in the end, the idea was to get like larger stones or elements which could interlock, which could create self-sustaining structures. And so this was a prototype for a larger building element. And it also functions differently. You can imagine in the future it could be put onto a rover, and then it's not the table moving, but the Fresnel lens moving. Finally, because the moon has no atmosphere, we also did tests in the vacuum chamber, which was a very small building volume, and it was quite difficult to print there and to get some good results. We are not landing on the moon tomorrow, but we might build a lunar station, which is the gateway station in a lunar orbit. The interesting part about stations, space stations, or spaceships, or any kind of base is that it actually comprises of different systems, like you would find as a big part, or as a house, this systems of a house or a household. And if you include all of this and look at this is all what humans need. And of course, you can also imagine that these kind of spaceship parameters, design parameters, are valid for a city. I'd need 1 more minute. And I continue a little bit what Simone mentioned earlier. This is the Living Architecture project led by the University of Newcastle, Rachel Armstrong. We are one of the partners, which is also about resources, and it's also about it has a little bit to do with how to treat waste. So it would be part of the life support system if we would look at it from a spaceship perspective. This was one of our bricks for a bioreactor, which could be stackable, and also it's the intention of the Living Architecture project is creating a 3-in-1 bioreactor, which produces through the microbial fuel cell electricity, and purifies water, really cleans the gray water and the urine, and through the synthetic microbial consortia also regenerates phosphate from that gray water. And then we have, in addition, a photobioreactor for oxygen and food. It's basically the greenhouse of a base for the microbes. This is the setup currently. These are just some how it's looking as of now. And we also imagine, and this is the last slide, how we can install these fuels or these bioreactors to make a really contribution to how we treat waste and how we can regenerate waste in our households. And you see here it's a multi-story building, and you also see appliances, 2 toilets, for example, where you really differentiate solid and liquids, and you can recreate that's not funny at all, actually. It's like, in Mali, they also have these toilets, the traditional ones. So you can really regenerate then the waste and clean the water and use it for toilet flushing or for the greenhouse, which is also part of that system. Thank you.